Welcome to Medcurity Live. I'm Amanda Hepper.
I'm Joe Gellatly.
Today we're going to talk about creating a culture of compliance. We're going to talk about 4 things. And before we get started, I was thinking about, as we were thinking about this topic, I have a good friend that was head of regulatory compliance for a nuclear power plant and actually consulted with other countries, including Russia and a variety of other countries that have nuclear power plants. And one thing that he found was the most important thing, the first step, is to identify what's important to your culture. Different countries have different cultures, as we know from our backgrounds, every practice has their own culture and every hospital has their own culture. So we suggest that you start there and understand that and then incorporate that in your culture of compliance. So the first thing that we'd like to talk about is training. So security awareness training.
Yep, as an ongoing priority for the organization, not to just break away from that annual training, right? Mm-hmm. So many groups have gotten that annual training down, but there's actually a better result from making this something that is continually in front of people, right? So you don't have to take them away for 2 hours, cram all the training down, in one time a year, and right. You can break this out and keep it very current and keep it fresh with little more bite-sized training, which could be an email, could be a manager meeting that you update people on, could be a quick video to watch, right?
So like just in time, right? So
yeah.
When there's information, kind of what you did last week, right, with Kobe Bryant. So just-in-time training. So take issues that are going on or very, people are hearing about, and incorporate that into your training so it might resonate.
It can make it a lot more relevant.
Right.
That's for sure. It takes definitely a more structured approach because you can't just only think about it once a year then as a manager or a practice right. administrator or a compliance officer. It means maybe building a schedule at the beginning of the year and saying, I'm going to provide education on these intervals, and you won't necessarily have all of those topics laid out if it's just in time. But you'll know, all right, first week of the month, time to come up with a little update to put out to people in a newsletter, et cetera.
And what I have seen work is also to invite other people to lead that training, right? So they get more educated, and then they're communicating that out to their peers
That's
as
good.
Well.
Like
so.
we're going to have everybody host live in the
That's
next
right.
couple weeks, right?
That's right.
Okay.
Surprise.
Perfect. Yeah.
The next item we'd like to talk about, which works in with training, is communication, right? So encouraging compliance, right? Not no repercussions if somebody reports one. You want people to feel like they can, if they see something, that they should be empowered to talk about that, and that is not a bad thing. It just is increasing awareness within their organization. So if somebody sees a laptop open with PHI there and it's unattended, to log it out and maybe leave a little note or something like that. So.
Yeah, it's something that can be handled really well or really poorly, and how you handle individual events will set the whole tone. It's so critical to the whole culture like we're talking about.
Right.
So if an employee reports that they had accidentally themselves handed off the wrong, after visit summary, handed it off to the wrong patient, that is a breach which we need to know about. We need to, take those all in accumulation, provide them to the government on a regular interval. So we have to know about that. How we respond to that employee coming to you and saying this just happened makes all the difference on whether you're going to continue to learn about these, right? So coming alongside an employee and saying, well, let's talk about the workflow. How can we help support this process? How can we, what broke and how can we help here? Versus, what did you do? And you need to not do that
right.
again. So maybe sometimes training is the right answer, but in situations where something was faxed to the wrong number or handed off incorrectly, it's often a workflow item that can be addressed that way. Obviously, you still have your sanction policy in place, so if there's intentional HIPAA violations, that's a little bit different. But those things that happen day in and day out, usually we can find a way to help support the staff versus just making it a disciplinary response, right?
Right. And in that vein, to have executive buy-in and modeling of that, right? So if you have your executives saying, hey, I inadvertently did this, and then they communicate that out, it lets people breathe deeply, and think, okay, it's okay, they're doing it, so not to encourage those issues, but it takes some of the burden or the angst out of it, I think.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, so if an executive opens a test phishing email, probably good to just share that and say, hey, I learned too, and this is something that we all are getting more and more aware of threats because we're getting tested, and so anyway, being vulnerable and open on that.
Right.
Which actually is number 4. We're going to talk about phishing emails as another example of a way to keep people on their toes, and we call that building a healthy paranoia too, where your staff or your teammates are really being vigilant, right? And phishing is another area where the threats evolve. We had just headlines yesterday where there's new coronavirus phishing emails because it's a hot topic, and people may respond to that quicker without putting that through the filter of, this is an external email. I'm not sure if this is really coming from the source it says it is. So putting an exercise in place to continually test with test phishing emails is really wise and important these days, and to schedule it across intervals of time, so it's not something that's happening. It goes out to all employees at once, where people can kind of pop up and say, hey, don't open that. Something that's scaled out, which we do at Medcurity. We have tools that can do that. So if it's something you're looking to address with your staff, that's an area that we provide some services in, where that can just be scheduled, automated through the year, provide reports on who may need additional training. And if someone falls for a phishing exercise, it goes right to additional training for them. So definitely an area that more than ever is really important and relevant for our healthcare environments. So training, communication, executive support, and phishing exercises, just a few of the ways.
Yeah.
And then walkthroughs.
Walkthroughs is another way. We recommend that those are, like the phishing expeditions, those are random. And I think it's a really good idea to spread the wealth on those too. I remember years ago when having perhaps some employees have trouble filling out their time cards, they got to audit the other employees for filling those out. And so same thing with random walkthroughs. Another fun tip is to use code words in your organization. So your front staff may be, checking in a patient, but if they start talking about other things that may not be appropriate, to have a common code word within your organization so that they can work that code word very obviously into a sentence, which cues the person that might be on the fringe of violating PHI.
So I feel like pineapple. Do you feel like pineapple? Or maybe there's other code words.
Maybe there's other ones. I don't know.
Yeah. That's makes a lot of sense. Then everybody's kind of holding each other accountable.
Yes.
And you have a lot of ears out on the floor helping coach to this, not just the compliance officer.
Right.
Good. Well, walkthroughs as well. If anybody's interested in a checklist of what a monthly, quarterly, regular walkthrough might consist of, certainly drop us a note or comment, and we can provide that. It's a way to definitely keep your thumb on how the employees are doing, and again, establishing this culture where it's just a continual awareness of the need to protect patient information.
Right, which we're all about.
That's right. Well, thank you for joining us.
Yes.
We'll be back next week.
See you next week.